So if you destroy your brain, the causal structure, you don't have access to
Right.
this world.
Then, how do we account for conscious experience post death in an afterlife or any kind of conscious experience after the demise of your physical body? Because the receiver model, this well, what is sometimes called dualism interactionism, but you don't have to affirm the dualism thing. But this interaction between mind and brain resulting in conscious experience. It seems that that would lead us to conclude that with the destruction of the brain, there is no conscious experience. But that doesn't seem to be what you're saying. So, why is it that the brain, like the receiver, like the radio, is required to? Let me not mix metaphors. Why is it on this view that the brain is required for conscious experience while you're alive? But then once you die, it's like, oh, okay, now we can have fully developmental lives without the brain. Or have I
Okay.
misunderstood the view?
No, this is great. So it might be that part of the brain. Okay, so let me just make a distinction here, because I mean the term brain for me, it conjures up a spatial reality. If you know, if I see a picture, I've never seen my own brain, but like I've seen pictures of brains. Okay, and so it's like there's a certain kind of like grayish pink tissue organized in a certain way in space. And so that spatial reality is not essential for my continued existence or for my consciousness, right? Um, However, the proposal that I'm offering is that that spatial structure is actually itself a representation of a more fundamental causal structure. Causal, I think of these as programs, basically, that allow and facilitate interaction in this world. And so, if I think about the total causal structure and call that the brain, the causal structure that allows interaction, and if that's completely destroyed, then I want to make a further distinction now between the part of that causal structure that's responsible for my access to a shared consciousness with you in this world versus the total causal structure that allows my consciousness like in any domain. Um, I need like an analogy here. It's like if we're playing a multiplayer game and we're all like plugged into like Minecraft or something, and we have our own screens, so we have our own access points to the game. And then through the rules of the game, maybe there's a way in which your avatar in the game can actually see within the game an icon that represents the rules of interaction of your icon in the game. This would be like a representation of your brain, your causal interaction in the game. And there's a certain rule in the game that if that icon gets destroyed, then you exit the game, and so people can't access your character anymore. Um, so let's just play this out. Let's say you're in the Minecraft world, and then your icon gets destroyed somehow. Zombies or whatever. Now you no longer have access to that game. The other players can't access you. I mean, imagine other people from around the world were accessing you. They can't access your avatar. You can't communicate with them. Um, but it doesn't mean that your consciousness is completely destroyed. It just means that now your consciousness has changed. It's like you no longer have access to that game, but maybe it's actually one of the rules of the game. You wanted a fully immersive experience where while you're in the game, you're turning off other algorithms, but when you're out of the game, now those other algorithms come back online, kind of like in the sort of classic near-death experience, where people report having consciousness outside the normal patterns within the game. I mean, like I'm fascinated by the cases where people were born colorblind and then they have a near death experience, and then for the first time, they say they see in color during their near death experience, like they have this expanded conscious power when their brain activity is diminished and they're reporting seeing things from outside their body and they're seeing in color for the first time, and then they come back to their body and now they're limited again to the context of this interaction. So this is kind of a long set of ideas here, but there's a lot here. What I want to suggest is that maybe you have a lot of different causal programs, and some of them can come online, and some of them can be offline at different states. If you think of your brain as the total of all of your programs, well, then I guess if you destroy all of those programs, well, then you're just effectively unconscious. Um, but But I don't think merely destroying the spatial brain destroys all your programs, because the spatial brain just
Mm.
represents some of the programs for accessing this spatial shared reality. So you destroy that. That's like just destroying your icon in the in the Minecraft that we were playing. Your icon, your avatar got destroyed, but that didn't mean that now you are completely destroyed. You do lose some access to some things, but not everything. So I mean, this connects up too with the problem of like losing your intellectual powers when your brain goes away, and then if your brain completely goes away, why do you get more powers back? Well, because it might be that your brain is facilitating experiences in a certain state of limitation, and when that gets taken off completely, then it's kind of like exiting the vehicle. When you're in the vehicle, you're affected by the traffic. If another car hits your car, that will affect you. But if you leave the vehicle, then you're no longer affected by the traffic. If you leave those causal mechanisms behind, you may have other powers. That's at least left open on this account. Does that help at all, or does that make it crazier?
No, it's mind blowing. I mean, it's far more informative a theory of the self than typical expositions of substance dualism. And I think that's one of the objections to dualism that's often raised. And so I want to go through some of these objections with you and find out which
Let's
ones are
do it.
actually pertinent to your view and which are not.
Yeah.
But I think I understand it. I think I get it. One analogy might be a different one, and I want to hear from you if this is right, is to think of the radio as as divided into FM and AM signals. And so even if the FM signals and the capacity for the radio to pick them up is destroyed, you still have AM. So on this analogy, the whole causal structure that brings about consciousness is like the whole radio. And the brain that's responsible for conscious experience in this world and domain is like FM, the set of what I don't know how radios work, but the set of things that allows you to get FM radio signals. And if that's destroyed, well, you still have AM radio to listen to. You still have consciousness, just of a different kind. So that might be, is that one way to think about it?
Love that. That's a beautiful analogy. Yeah, thank you for that. Especially because it helps to illustrate that, if you're listening to FM and you're doing one station at a time, your experience is limited to that station, right? And then if that station's destroyed, right, that goes to static. It's like Alzheimer's. It's like you lost it. You don't have access to it. So it's a real significant thing. But it doesn't follow that if you lose all those capacities on the FM, that therefore there's nothing left. You can go to the AM, right? So I mean, every analogy sort of has its limitations, but I think it does illustrate a lot of what I'm trying to say here, that the causal capacities that you have to simulate experiences is not limited to those that are showing up manifesting as a spatial brain. I think the spatial brain is like, sort of the FM. It's giving you a certain range of experiences. But then, people in the near-death experiences, there was one case I thought was so fascinating. They said that they had this experience of leaving their body and experiencing some higher being. And the higher being was not like actually God. It was just like another being that had developed virtue of humility and compassion. And I just remember that the person was saying, "Oh, I want that virtue. I want that compassion. I want that humility. How do I get that?" And the being said, "There are things that you get, these qualities that you get only through the body, being in the body. Only." And my translation was only through coming into states of limitation to going into FM are you going to have certain experiences that will generate these through hardship, through states of limit, through challenge. You're going to then be able to experience the development of virtue. Then, when you move to AM, you basically leave this state of limitation. You come into this expanded state of consciousness. You're actually going to carry with you those virtues that you forged in the states of limitation. And it's really important that there's states of limitation where you don't have access to all the knowledge. It's part of what makes it the challenge. You don't have all your abilities, all of your powers that you could have outside of this state of limitation. So you can generate and develop, generate's not the right word. You can develop, inculcate those virtues through these experiences that are unique. Um, then your body scatters and then you rediscover the powers you left behind on this model. And that seemed to be what the near death experience was conveying. It's like, okay, it's not your time. and the person was like, okay, yeah, I want these virtues, like send me back, I want to go back into the state of limitation, because even though it's painful, even though it's hard, there's a challenge to it. It's worth it if I can generate. I keep saying generate, but you know what I'm trying to say. Develop these deeper virtues that can last within me, my soul, if you will.
I can imagine a traditional physicalist listening to this, a naturalist, and saying, okay, that's all well and good. I think you've secured the intelligibility of retaining consciousness, even in the face of the evidence we have for the connection between brain states and mental states. But all of this undiscovered, heretofore undiscovered structure, you have to posit these other uh, lines of communication like AM and FM, and this more literally the added structure of the underlying causal structure that generates consciousness that we don't have direct access to, and now we have to view the brain or the corresponding part of the brain that leads to that projection. That's just one part of the broader structure that is you, or that is your capacities. That's all very ad hoc. It's contrived. It makes the hypothesis here far more complex than the naturalist one that just says you're just the brain. Do you think these are costs to your view, that you have to posit these added structures that we don't directly observe by the nature of the case?
See, the way that I would think about it is I don't have to posit these. It's more that I like to sort of I like what you just said there about intelligibility. I like to kind of develop a working model to sort of test whether this is even a coherent theory. Um, so the way that I think about it is, I'm not positing my existence. I think that I'm able to be aware of myself. I mean, also in addition, I think there are theoretical reasons, if I weren't self-aware, to posit my own existence as well, to account for various things as the bearer of my consciousness, a thing that has my consciousness. Um, so I'm aware of myself, and then as far as whether I should posit a brain in addition to myself, well, now I do have reasons to think that there's a kind of systematic element to my experience that I think is explained in terms of a causal structure. And I have evidence of the existence of brains. Again, even though I haven't seen my own brain, I've got evidence of it. And so I'm sort of thinking about it the other way, that actually positing the brain, which I think is a good posit, requires evidence. I think I have that evidence. Um, if I start to kind of go beyond, the existence of my brain and the causal structures, and start talking about these expanded states of consciousness, well, what I'm doing there is I'm trying to give a larger account that can explain a lot of types of data, but it's more of a working hypothesis. So what's more essential to my account is that I exist. I'm a conscious being, um, and for various reasons that we haven't exactly gone into, though we've alluded to that some of them in terms of what makes you you across time. I think I'm the kind of being whose identity isn't determined or grounded in just bodily states. And so, because of that, because of my self awareness of myself continuing, then I think that um, it's sort of reasonable to expect then that I'm not going to fall apart when the things that don't determine who I am dissipate. I think about this in terms of like generating thoughts in my mind. If I generate thoughts in my mind, my existence doesn't go away when the thoughts go away. And in the same way, when I generate visual images in my mind, my existence doesn't go away when the visual images go away. And so I just take this all the way out. Like, no matter what spatial changes happen, my existence doesn't depend on those things because my identity isn't tied to those things. So this is a reason to think that I continue to exist through any changes of material states. And then from here I can sort of infer, okay, well, how does this look? Then I give some complex story that it may sort of sound ad hoc if I'm needing that story for my account. It's not that I need it. It's just I can tell that story and it sort of makes sense of how things could go. Um,
Hmm.
it shows that it's at least intelligible, right? Because sometimes people make an intelligibility objection, like in principle, this can't work, right? So I'm sort of responding to that. I'm saying this makes sense to working hypothesis, and I mean I have evidence that I think the account kind of best explains the evidence, but um, it's not required for my essential view.